What is the Narcissistic Martyr Parent Ploy, and how can a narcissistic parent use this strategy to demean, marginalize, otherize, dehumanize, and diminish their own child? That's what I'll be talking about in today's episode of Beyond Family Scapegoating Abuse, so stick around. Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Rebecca Mandeville, licensed psychotherapist and certified clinical trauma professional and the author of Rejected, Shamed, and Blamed: Help and Hope for Adults in the Family Scapegoat Role. And today I want to talk about a strategy that, frankly, a colleague of mine and I could not find anything written about it when we did a search, and didn't find any research on it. And this colleague by the name of SP Crawford, they and I wrote an article that I'll be including in the video description if you want to read what we wrote about what SP Crawford called the Narcissistic Martyr Parent Ploy. And I'm going to go over this narcissistic parental scapegoating strategy with you today in this short video. The Narcissistic Martyr Parent Ploy, SP Crawford and I felt, would be a form of covert narcissism. This isn't narcissism that would be readily evident to the casual observer, and that is what can make it doubly crazy-making when you suffer from this kind of scapegoating abuse. And so I felt it important to put this material out for people who may have experienced this in their childhood and may continue to experience it as an adult, so that you can identify it, recognize the signs. And as I say often in my videos, awareness is one of the first steps toward healing. Once we have the awareness, we can start to make different choices, and we can learn how to protect ourselves better if we are still in touch with family that are using various strategies to keep us in that family scapegoat role. The Narcissistic Martyr Parent Ploy is strongly associated with the story of the difficult child. The parent enjoys telling people, anyone who will listen, what a difficult child they have. And there's many stories around how and why the child is so difficult. It can start with how difficult the child was to carry. The baby was born 3 or 4 weeks late, and what a hardship this was to have to carry such a long-term pregnancy. The baby refused to latch on and take breast milk, and so this was very difficult for the parent because they were not able to breastfeed. The baby maybe was colicky and kept them up all night, and many doctor's visits. On and on and on it goes. It will usually start with stories from infancy, but not always. It can start if the child develops some sort of physical issue or behavioral difficulty. And, the posture that always comes to mind is, the woe is me, put Velcro here, Velcro here. If you had a parent doing that a lot around your existence, you probably may have suffered from the martyr parent ploy. So let's talk more about what that is. Along with being the difficult problem child, you may also have been described as an ungrateful child, an insensitive child, a child who only cares about their own needs. When you become an adult, despite the fact you are the one being scapegoated, which no one seems to want to see or recognize, you'll often be labeled the narcissist in your family. And I have had clients come to me in very vulnerable states who are willing to be aware and work on themselves and look at themselves, unlike a lot of their family members, And one of their first questions for me is, can you tell me if I'm narcissistic? Or they had a therapist that mentioned they may be narcissistic or borderline. That comes up a lot with my scapegoated adult clients. And they sincerely want to know if they are the problem in their family. And I know that there is probably somewhere in their family system, they were labeled the difficult problem child when they were young, and now as an adult, they're labeled narcissistic. The martyr parent has this scapegoating story about the child, and that's the hub of the wheel to remember when I'm talking about what my colleague and I named the narcissistic martyr parent ploy. The recalcitrant child, the child who almost as intentionally made their parents' life difficult by being born later than they were supposed to be, or not drinking breast milk. I've had more than one client tell me that the parent, in this case a mother, would blame their child for all the problems in the relationship for, quote unquote, you refuse to drink my breast milk. Okay, think about that for a minute. This was an infant. The infant, for various reasons, in some cases because of allergies, it turned out, allergies to milk, celiac disease, colic, couldn't drink the breast milk and would get very sick if they did, or wouldn't latch on. And that child or adult child is now blamed for all the problems in the relationship. If you're watching this as a clinician and this is new to you, this really happens. These are the stories I hear from very believable reporters. Many of my clients are actually therapists, psychologists themselves, licensed professionals. I have no reason to doubt these reports. And this is the burden that is put on these scapegoated children, that they are the problem. And if there's a relationship problem, it's the fault of the scapegoated child. Extreme examples of the martyr parent ploy, for me as a clinician, are reminiscent somewhat of Munchausen by proxy. And that is because the parent is receiving attention by making out that their child is ill, is sick when maybe they're not, but also mentally ill when they're not, emotionally ill when the child is not. The child is more than likely reacting to the emotional insensitivities, abuse, or lack of nurturing from the parent. This narcissistic parent who's using this martyr parent ploy technique will make it clear they're very burdened by this child. You know, it's kind of it's a difficult job to be their parent, but someone's got to do it. You know, it's a terrible burden to have such a difficult child, such an ill child, such a bad behaving child. And they tell this story repeatedly to anyone who will listen, with the hand to the forehead and the woe is me, and they get a lot of attention for that. And that is why I do compare it to Munchausen by proxy. Again, I want to be clear. I'm saying it's somewhat reminiscent. It's not mirroring it identically, but there is that same element of getting attention for having this problem child. With the martyr parent ploy, the physical illness is not the focus, as with Munchausen by proxy, but again, the child's behaviors, for example, their morals, their physical appearance or capabilities, what kinds of grades they're getting at school, if there's reports from teachers, the child's not doing well for some reason, well, maybe because of what's going on at home, they may be acting out. So these would be the types of things that the parent would focus on that will get them this social support for having to be the parent of such a challenging child. As a consequence, the child, especially when this starts very young, again, in infancy, it can start, they will develop a pervasive sense of guilt and toxic shame. Toxic shame is held unconsciously, but it can permeate every aspect of your being, and it can debilitate that child psycho-emotionally for the rest of their life. This is a very serious issue. Scapegoating in general and these scapegoating strategies that parents use can debilitate someone for life if they don't find out what they're suffering from and get help for it. And often they're suffering from complex trauma and what I am now calling family scapegoating trauma, which I will be presenting information on that soon. I'm doing some research in that area, and I'd like to give the kind of trauma family scapegoats experience a name and define it, just like I did with family scapegoating abuse. The theme of the narcissistic martyr parent ploy can be summed up in one sentence. It's your fault I can't love you. That is the unspoken and sometimes actually spoken, said out loud theme for the scapegoated child. It's your fault I can't love you. You're so fundamentally defective that I can't love you, but I'm doing the best I can with this job I've been given. Some of you may be really feeling a bodily sensation when I'm looking right into the camera and saying this to you. So please do take care of yourself after this video, or pause it right now and take some deep breaths if you're having a somatic response, because this may be the unspoken message you were given for much of your life, that it's your fault that your parent could not love you. As children tend to believe what parents tell them, especially when they're very young, the parents really have a lot of power in describing reality. The child will believe that there's something wrong with them and that it's their fault their parent doesn't seem to be bonding with them, able to love them. And children sense this on the deepest levels, even if they don't have the language for it, as I mentioned in a recent video in my clinical series. Because of this martyr parent ploy, many scapegoated children spend their entire lives trying to earn the parent's love, trying to not be defective, trying to be good enough. But the bar's always raised, the finish line's always moving farther out. They never get that love. They never feel that sense of acceptance, much less unconditional acceptance that supposedly children are to receive from their parents. The trauma response of fawn and submit is very common in my scapegoated adult clients who come to me for help. They have become very submissive, very fawning from an early age in an attempt to try to get love from that rejecting parent. It's also important to note that perfectly normal, expected, age-appropriate behaviors of a child can be pathologized by the parent. And I have a lot of stories to back that up from clients and from my own research on what I name family scapegoating abuse, or FSA. The common everyday occurrences or little accidents or things that happen with children as they're learning how to work their little bodies are pathologized, are seen as deliberately destructive acts. In one of my earliest videos, I talked about a client who, when they were 2 or 3 years old, a parent had bought a new car, gave the kid a Coca-Cola, and went over a bump, the drink spilled, and that child was told that they had spilled the drink on purpose, deliberately, to ruin the parent's new car. Hello? I mean, think of that. You give a very young child an open drink, go over a bump, it might spill. Why'd you give them the drink in the first place? But that will be used against the child, and that will be burned into their memories. And believe me, these things are remembered decades later, and the sense of guilt, the sense of shame, the sense of being bad, the sense of being wrong the child was set up to fail by the parent. And now the parent has another story to tell, how their kid ruined the new car. These constant repeated stories of how bad or problematic the child is, that they deserve the poor treatment they get, can be taken in by the child. And indeed, I have adults coming to me who tell me they deserved the treatment they got, that they were a bad kid. Right away, my ears are going to prick up, and I'm going to wonder if the Martyr Parent Ploy was used on them, because they are convinced they're the problem. And sometimes they're coming to me hoping I can help them fix themselves so the parent will love them or the family will accept them. The Martyr Parent Ploy ties in, of course, with being the family identified patient, something that's been talked about, researched on in the field of family systems for 50 years or more. So the whole family system will invariably start to see this scapegoated child who is being used with the Martyr Parent Ploy technique, whether consciously or not, doesn't matter on the parent's part. The results are the same. The entire family will see the child the same way as this power-holding narcissistic parent does. They have to see them the same way, or they might not be in alignment with the reality, the false narrative that the power-holding parent is using to control that family system. That is what happens in narcissistic family systems. So is it any wonder if a scapegoated adult child wakes up to what is going on, that they may have no choice but to end contact because the whole family's seeing them this way? And that's why you may have seen my short video. I'm inviting you all to participate in a poll. I'm putting the link right there. I'll also put it in the description. It's a poll on going no contact, and I'd love you to participate that. If you can take a quick minute after this video to click on that link and put your vote in the poll and leave a comment if you'd like. It's going to help me when I do this series on scapegoating and going no contact with family, whether dysfunctional or narcissistic family system. The narcissistic martyr parent ploy is used to indoctrinate the family into the rejecting, shaming, and blaming story about this child. And this will be attached to the child, as I use the analogy often of being tarred and feathered. That story will stick on you like feathers onto tar. And that's how you will go through life, tarred and feathered by the scapegoat story, by the story of how you are unworthy of unconditional acceptance, love, support in your family. And it's your fault. Well, it's not your fault. What you're experiencing, what you have experienced, if this has happened to you, is you've experienced psycho-emotional abuse in the form of family scapegoating abuse and the narcissistic martyr parent ploy. And if you related to this video, do check out the article that SP Crawford and I wrote about this. There's some more information in there for you. But the main take home is that these repeated, inflated, and false accounts of your character, who you are, your behaviors, is something that no child should have to ever go through. It's very damaging. It can create toxic shame that's held within the unconscious, a sense of being fundamentally bad or wrong or defective. And it is definitely woven deep into the scapegoat narrative if this has happened to you in your family. And it's important to note that these repeated false accounts in regard to who you are and your character would constitute gaslighting. And I'm sure most of you know about gaslighting. There's a link to know more about it in this same article I mentioned. I'll be doing videos talking about gaslighting, but that's so out there now in the mainstream that I probably don't have to say too much about it. But remember that if you relate to what I'm saying here, you've been a victim also of gaslighting in your family. And those who have been gaslighted in this manner, what's truly tragic and heartbreaking is they may never reach out for help because of shame and because they've been convinced from such an early age, again, when those neural pathways are forming, that they are defective, that they are bad, that they were a burden to their parent, that they are fortunate the parent even kept them. I'm not exaggerating. The adult child can feel, well, gosh, I was so difficult, but they didn't kick me out. I can still go home and visit sometimes. Isn't that nice of them? This is a form of abuse that is very gratifying to the parent. And that's why I do associate it with narcissism. And as I said at the beginning, typically covert narcissism, and that's another topic I'll cover more extensively, is growing up with a covert narcissist parent. So think about your past. Did your parents seem to enjoy telling stories about you to strangers, to family, to friends? Was it done in front of you? Often this will be done in front of you. That's why I just don't agree with people who say scapegoating always happens behind your back. It doesn't. It can happen right in front of you. The family doesn't change their behavior at all when friends or other family are around. That's their way of inoculating friends and family, people off the street, into the scapegoat story. And that's their way of shaming you and humiliating you, is to do it right in front of you when you're in the room. I know people who, when they were teenagers, they would bring a boyfriend or girlfriend home to meet the family, someone they maybe just were having a first date with. Back in the old days when I grew up, going to the mall with, walk through the mall and excited to bring them home, their friend, to meet a parent. And that parent will get that date that the scapegoat child brought home and tell them the whole story from when you were still in the womb, and how difficult you were, and how difficult the labor was, and how many problems you have, and how difficult it was for them. And you're sitting right there with this person you brought home, and you probably will learn to never bring someone you're dating home again. If this video stirred things up for you, you will want to take a few minutes of just having some quiet time, checking in with your body, noticing parts, as I've talked about in my last two videos. Are there some very young selves coming up that need to talk about this with you? Are there some traumatized parts that need to share their story with you, so you can tend to those parts and let them know it was a lie? It was all a lie. It was a false narrative that you were burdened with and you were harmed by, and it wasn't true. And that's what you want to tell those parts. It was a lie. It wasn't true. And there's nothing wrong with you. If you got something out of this video, please take a second to hit the thumbs up. That lets me know that you want more videos like this. If you haven't subscribed already, I hope you do. And don't forget to check out the poll I'm doing around going no contact with family. See you soon.